USPS disappeared with my $1 million check, not knowing I was a renowned attorney. It was a crisp autumn morning in Boston when I received the call that would change everything. My phone buzzed against the polished mahogany of my desk at Winters & Associates, where I'd spent the last 15 years building a reputation as one of the Northeast's most formidable corporate attorneys. "James Winters speaking," I answered, my attention still half focused on the merger documents spread before me. "James, it's Philip." The voice of my oldest client and friend crackled through the line. The settlement came through. All $1 million. Of it, the check is being drafted as we speak. I leaned back in my leather chair, allowing myself a rare moment of satisfaction. The Rosenberg case had been grueling. 18 months of depositions, motions, and late nights. A software patent dispute that most of my colleagues had deemed unwinnable, but I had seen something in the fine print that others had missed. "That's excellent news, Philip. You deserve every penny." "No, James, we deserve it. Your contingency fee is as agreed, 20%, $200,000. I'm having my accountant cut the check today and sending it to your office address." After hanging up, I returned to my work with renewed energy. $200,000 wasn't life-changing money for someone in my position, but it represented vindication, proof that I'd made the right call when others doubted. 3 days later, Philip texted me a tracking number. The check was on its way via USPS priority mail. I didn't think much of it at the time, just another business matter neatly concluding. I certainly didn't expect the Postal Service to lose a letter containing a check for $200,000, and I definitely didn't anticipate that this would lead me into a battle that would test every legal skill I'd honed over my career. The tracking showed delivery expected by Friday. Friday came and went. No check. The weekend passed. Still nothing. By Monday morning, I was mildly concerned but not alarmed. Delays happen, but when I checked the tracking, what I saw made my blood run cold. Delivery status: undeliverable as addressed. Return to sender initiated. But Philip had sent it to my correct office address, the same address where I'd received countless legal documents without issue. Something wasn't right. I called Philip immediately. "The check's been marked undeliverable," I told him. "They're supposedly returning it to you." "That's impossible," Philip replied, confusion evident in his voice. I triple-checked the address before sending it. "And James, there's something else you should know. The check, it wasn't just for your fee." "What do you mean?" After discussing it with the board, we decided to invest more heavily in the expansion project we talked about. The check I sent you was for the full settlement amount, $1 million, made out to you to deposit into your firm's client trust account. I felt the weight of his words settle in my stomach like a stone. This wasn't just about my fee anymore. This was $1 million that had vanished into the labyrinthine system of the United States Postal Service. As the gravity of the situation sank in, I made a decision. "Philip, don't worry, I'll handle this personally." What the USPS didn't know was that they hadn't just lost any ordinary letter. They had lost $1 million check belonging to a client of James Winters, a man who had built his reputation, taking on seemingly impossible cases and winning. A man who knew the legal system inside and out. A man who, when necessary, could be as relentless as a force of nature. They had no idea what was coming. I started my investigation at the local post office on Federal Street, walking distance from my office. The building was a stately stone structure, built in the 1930s with high ceilings and a floor worn smooth by decades of foot traffic. I approached the counter where a middle-aged woman with tired eyes was helping customers. When my turn came, I placed my phone on the counter, displaying the tracking information. "I need to speak with a supervisor about a missing priority mail envelope," I said, keeping my voice even. "It contains time-sensitive legal documents." The clerk, her name, Tag read Diane, gave me an apologetic look. "I'm sorry, sir, but according to this, the package was undeliverable and is being returned to sender." "That's the problem," I replied. "The address was correct. I've received mail there for 15 years without issue." After some back and forth, Diane disappeared into a back office. Several minutes later, a man in his 50s emerged, introducing himself as Mark Lawson, the station manager. "Mr. Winters, Diane tells me you're inquiring about a priority mail package." Yes, a letter containing a check for $1 million that has mysteriously been marked undeliverable, despite being correctly addressed. I saw his expression change. The mention of the amount clearly caught his attention. $1 million? By regular mail? His skepticism was palpable. Yes, I responded coolly. My client sent it, and now it's lost in your system. I'd like to know why and where it is now. Mark took me to his small office, cluttered with binders and paperwork. For the next hour, he made calls and checked computer records while I sat, patiently observing. Finally, he looked up with a furrowed brow. According to our system, the carrier reported that the address didn't exist. But I checked, and 600 Atlantic Avenue is definitely a valid address. It's the Bank of America building, I said. One of the most recognizable buildings in the financial district. Mark rubbed his temples. This doesn't make sense. Let me check. Something else. He made another call, speaking in hushed tones before hanging up with a troubled expression. Mr. Winters, the letter was rerouted to our central processing facility in Chelsea. From there, he hesitated. From there, we've lost the trail. You've lost the trail of a letter containing $1 million check? I kept my voice measured but firm. It appears so. Sometimes items get missorted or... I understand how mail works, Mr. Lawson, I interrupted. What I need is for you to find this specific piece of mail immediately. We'll do our best, but no, your best isn't good enough here. This isn't a birthday card that can arrive late. This is $1 million that belongs to my client. I pulled out my business card and slid it across the desk. I'm giving you 48 hours to locate this envelope before I escalate this matter significantly. As I left the post office, I called my assistant, Rebecca. Cancel my appointments for the rest of the week, I instructed, and get me everything you can on USPS procedures for lost valuable mail, their liability coverage, and the contact information for their legal department in Washington. Is something wrong? She asked, concern evident in her voice. Not yet, I replied, but if they don't find that check soon, something will be very wrong indeed. For them. That evening I sat in my home office, surrounded by printouts of postal regulations, case law regarding mail liability, and notes from my conversation with Mark. The USPS had a surprisingly complex legal structure, a quasi-governmental agency with its own rules and limitations. Their insurance would cover nowhere near the value of the lost check. As I reviewed the materials, my phone rang. Philip again. Any news? He asked, tension evident in his voice. They've lost it in their system, I told him frankly. But don't worry, we have options. Options? James, this is $1 million we're talking about. I know exactly what we're talking about, I assured him. First thing tomorrow, you'll contact your bank and put a stop payment on the check. That protects us if someone tries to cash it fraudulently. Already done, Philip replied. But they charge a hefty fee for that, and they said it could take up to 90 days for a replacement check of this size to be issued. That's their standard line. I'll help you navigate that. I paused, considering our next moves. Philip, I need you to trust me on this. By the time I'm done, the USPS will either find that check or wish they had never lost it in the first place. As I hung up, I glanced at the wall where my law degrees and bar admissions hung in simple frames. 15 years of practice, dozens of complex corporate cases won. I had built my career on attention to detail and persistence. The Postal Service had no idea who they were dealing with, and they were about to find out. By day 3, it became clear that the local post office wasn't going to resolve this issue. Mark Lawson had called with apologies, but no solutions. The check seemed to have vanished into the vast network of processing centers, sorting machines, and delivery routes that make up the United States Postal Service. It was time to escalate. Began with a formal complaint to the USPS Consumer Affairs Office, followed by a detailed letter to the Postal Inspection Service, their law enforcement arm responsible for mail theft and fraud. But I knew from my research that these steps, while necessary, were unlikely to produce immediate results. So I took a more direct approach. Through my network of legal connections, I obtained the direct number for Eleanor Simmons, Regional Counsel, for the USPS Northeast area. It took 3 calls and some gentle persuasion to her assistant before she finally took my call. Ms. Simmons, "Thank you for speaking with me," I began, my tone professional but urgent. "I'm representing a client in a matter involving a lost priority mail envelope containing a check for $1 million. There was a pause on the line. "Mr. Winters, while I sympathize with your situation, the Postal Service's liability is limited by federal regulation. For a priority mail piece, the maximum insurance is only—" "I'm well aware of the limitations outlined in Title 39 of the U.S. Code," I interrupted smoothly. "But this isn't about insurance claims. This is about a systemic failure that has resulted in the disappearance of a financial instrument of significant value sent through a service that your agency guarantees." "Even so, Ms. Simmons," I continued, "before we go further, you should know that I've prepared documentation for a formal complaint with the Postal Regulatory Commission, a Freedom of Information Act request for all tracking and handling records related to this item, and a petition for extraordinary relief to expedite these matters. I've also drafted a preliminary brief for a potential Federal Tort Claims Act lawsuit." The silence on the other end of the line told me I had her attention. "That seems excessive for a lost mail case," she finally responded, her voice more measured. "It would be if this were simply about a lost letter. But we both know that when a $1 million check disappears after being incorrectly marked as undeliverable to a prominent address in downtown Boston, there are questions that need answering." I could almost hear her mentally recalculating her approach. "What exactly are you looking for, Mr. Winters?" "3 things. First, I want a dedicated investigator from the Postal Inspection Service assigned to this case immediately. Second, I want access to all tracking data, carrier notes, and scanning information related to this item. And third, I want this resolved within 7 days." "That timeline is entirely reasonable given the circumstances," I finished for her. "Ms. Simmons, I've litigated against federal agencies before. It's time-consuming, expensive, and generates precisely the kind of publicity that I imagine your superiors would prefer to avoid. Particularly when the narrative becomes USPS loses. $1 million check, then stonewalls client." Another pause, longer this time. "Send me the tracking number and all relevant details," she finally said. "I'll see what I can do." Within hours of that call, things began to move. A postal inspector named Raymond Chen contacted me, explaining he'd been assigned to personally investigate the matter. The Regional Distribution Center began an intensive search of their facilities. Security camera footage was being reviewed. 2 days later, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Inspector Chen, a meticulous man in his 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor, arrived with a thick folder tucked under his arm. "Mr. Winters," he said after my assistant showed him in, "I think we've found the problem." He spread several documents on my desk. Internal tracking reports, facility transfer logs, and photographs of mail sorting equipment. "Your envelope was misrouted due to a machine reading error," he explained, pointing to a blurry image of a mail tray. "The OCR scanner misread the zip code, sending it to a facility in New Jersey instead of the downtown delivery route. From there, it was erroneously marked address unknown and sent to our dead letter office in Atlanta." "And where is it now?" I asked, leaning forward. "That's the good news," Chen said with the hint of a smile. "We've located it. It's being sent by secure courier to my office as we speak. I should have it by tomorrow morning." Relief washed over me, though I maintained my professional composure. "I appreciate your thoroughness, Inspector." Chen nodded, then hesitated. "There's something else you should know. This isn't an isolated incident. We've had several high-value items misrouted in a similar pattern over the past few months. Your case has helped us identify a potential systemic issue in our sorting protocols." As Chen left, I immediately called Philip with the update. For the first time in days, there was optimism in his voice. "So we'll have the check tomorrow?" he asked. "If all goes as planned," I confirmed. "But this experience has highlighted a vulnerability we need to address. In the future, we should use more secure methods for transferring large sums." "Agreed," Philip said. "And James, thank you. Not everyone would have gone to these lengths." "It's what you hired me for," I replied simply, "to protect your interests no matter what." That night, as I drove home through the rain-slicked streets of Boston, I reflected on the power of persistence and knowing how to navigate complex systems. The $1 million check had been found, not because I'd gotten lucky, but because I'd understood exactly which levers to pull and which pressure points to press. The next morning, Inspector Chen arrived at my office precisely at 9 a.m., carrying a secure USPS courier bag. My assistant Rebecca showed him directly to my conference room, where Philip was already waiting, having flown in from Chicago the night before. "Gentlemen," Chen said, placing the bag on the table and removing a worn priority mail envelope. "I believe this belongs to you." Philip reached for it with barely contained anxiety, examining the envelope carefully before opening it. His relief was palpable as he removed the check, confirming that it was indeed the original $1 million payment, made out exactly as it should be. "Everything appears to be in order," I noted, examining the check myself. "I'd like to document its condition for our records." With Philip's permission, Rebecca took photographs of the check and envelope from multiple angles, creating a clear record of its return. Inspector Chen provided us with a formal chain of custody document, which I had him sign in front of us. "On behalf of the United States Postal Service, I want to extend our sincere apologies for this incident," Chen said, his tone genuinely contrite. "As I mentioned yesterday, your case has helped us identify a significant process flaw in our system." "I appreciate that, Inspector," I replied. "But I'm curious, what changes will be implemented to prevent this from happening again?" Chen straightened his tie. "As a direct result of your case, we're instituting new protocols for high-value mail handling and enhancing the redundancy checks in our OCR systems. Regional Counsel has also asked me to inform you that the Postmaster General's office has taken a personal interest in this matter." After Chen departed, Philip and I remained in the conference room. The check now safely stored in my firm's secure safe until we could properly deposit it. "I still can't believe it," Philip said, shaking his head. "If it had been anyone else handling this, I'm convinced that check would be gone forever." "The system works," I replied, "but sometimes it needs a little encouragement." Philip laughed. "Is that what they're calling legal intimidation these days?" "I prefer strategic advocacy," I said with a slight smile. "But the important thing is that we've secured your company's future. Now shall we discuss that expansion project?" As we began reviewing the plans Philip had brought along, I reflected on the past week's events. In my 15 years of practice, I'd handled complex mergers, tense negotiations, and high-stakes litigation. But this experience, tracking down a lost piece of mail, had reminded me of something fundamental about the practice of law. It wasn't just about knowing statutes and precedents. It was about understanding systems and the people who operate them. It was about knowing when to apply pressure and when to build bridges. Most of all, it was about persistence, the unwavering determination to protect my client's interests, no matter how unusual the circumstance. Later that afternoon, after Philip had left for the airport, I received an unexpected email from Eleanor. "Simmons, the USPS Regional Counsel. Mr. Winters, I've been briefed on the successful resolution of your matter. While not our typical protocol, the Postmaster for the Northeast region would like to meet with you next week to discuss your experience and how it might inform our process improvements. Your perspective, especially given your legal background, would be valuable as we work to ensure similar incidents don't occur in the future. Regards, Eleanor Simmons." I smiled as I read the message. What had begun as a frustrating loss had transformed into an opportunity, not just to recover my client's funds, but potentially to improve a system that millions of Americans rely on daily. I typed a brief acceptance of the invitation. That evening, as I walked home through the Boston Common, watching the last golden light of day filter through the autumn leaves, I thought about how this case would be remembered. Not as my biggest or most lucrative, certainly, but perhaps as one of the most instructive. In the legal profession, we often focus on dramatic courtroom victories and landmark decisions, but sometimes the most important work happens behind the scenes, in phone calls, meetings, and the relentless pursuit of what's right. The USPS had indeed disappeared with my client's $1 million check. They hadn't known they were dealing with a renowned attorney who wouldn't rest until it was found. Now they did. And perhaps more importantly, they knew I'd be watching to ensure the changes they promised would actually be implemented. Because that's what good lawyers do. We follow through even after the immediate crisis has passed. The check was safe. The client was satisfied. And I had been reminded of why I became an attorney in the first place. To navigate complex systems on behalf of those who need an advocate. Sometimes that's the greatest victory of all.